Let's just jump right in. You have been following this case the past week. What are your overall thoughts of Lori Vallow defending herself?
I think surprisingly good, not over the top great, not as good as a lawyer because there are some potential defenses and issues she has in this case, but much better than most pro se defendants that we've seen who are not lawyers. The opening statement I thought was the one place where she took a moment um, and got emotional. I don't believe any of this stuff because I know so much and you know so much, but the jury only knows what they hear in the courtroom. So I think it's surprisingly good. I think it's potentially dangerous for prosecutors. So they've got the evidence. They've just got to put it all together and make sure this jury doesn't fall into the trap and believe that Lori Daybell was this doting mother of five and this loving wife with a husband. Like all of that's got to go out the door, and that's the job of the prosecution. You got to prove your case.
We see different sides of Lori almost daily. We saw you mentioned the opening statement where she got emotional. Then we've seen where she tries to be insightful or profound even. But then when the woman that went on a date with Charles the night before he was died took the stand, yes. What did you think of that cross-examination?
I thought it was, you know, you go into a case and sometimes I become a little jaded. I have to forget that you never know what's going to happen in a trial. Like as much as you prepare, oh yeah, I know what this is about. Something happens that you don't expect. And the woman who's on a date with Charles the night before he's shot and killed by Alex Cox gets on the witness stand and Lori is cross-examining this woman. Wow. I don't know what the jury's going to do with it. Again, I think prosecutors really have to make the case that Lori was not in this marriage. Like she had moved on already. But I thought this was an opportunity where if it was a lawyer doing it rather than Lori, it got very personal, and she wanted to make this woman out to be a villain. She's not a villain. She's a woman on an app looking for someone to date, perhaps looking for someone to spend her life with. There's no evil associated with that. I thought what she could have done rather than bring out the clause and try to make this woman into, oh, you date married men, rather than go down that road, which is like, okay, you can do that, but like it doesn't really get you closer to where you want to be. In her opening statement, Charles is the villain in the story. Charles is the bad guy. Charles the one with the temper. Charles is the one trying to go after people with a bat. Why not? I think what a defense attorney would have done there is almost, and I think Lori could have been very effective if she bonded with this woman and said Charles was lying to you too, right? That's the tact where if you want to really win a case and you've picked your villain already, then everything has to be about making him more of a villain. Rather than make her into the villain, make Charles. Charles didn't tell you that we were trying to reconcile, and she has a lot of leeway to do that, right? Charles lied to you. Oh, I feel so bad that you spent all this time and were invested in all these conversations, and he lied to you. He misled you. He didn't tell you this. He didn't tell you that. Oh my goodness, I feel so bad for you. But rather than have that attitude, she couldn't help herself. She is who she is, right? And she was angry that Charles dared to date someone else. And Charles isn't here, so I'm going to go after her.
That's an interesting point. I had not heard, but that makes sense on her behalf if she were to do that. But you're right, she can't help herself.
Help herself.
She also had her brother on the stand and mentioned the green chili enchiladas, which it was kind of an. Why do you think she did that? Any insight?
It was interesting because, she tries to remove herself by referring to him as Mr. Cox when, come on, it's Adam. It's your brother. You guys grew up together. Like you guys have history. You guys know each other. He knows you. You know him. What are we talking about here? And the green chili, again, it's like she gets lost in the moment, doesn't realize the significance of the witness, and then what I saw was really a sibling moment there. It was a sibling moment. and it was coming from him as well. Like Adam was like, "Would you stop with this already?" No, and he's answering these questions. No, no. You know, and I could hear the rest of what he's thinking, right, just by watching him. And it was a moment where, again, I don't think she won anything, and she always has the last question, which I think standby counsel probably coached her to write this down. You didn't see what happened. You don't know what happened. Da 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 da. And
Right.
that's all well and good, but I thought prosecutors did a nice job with Adam in direct, and she didn't do much on the cross, but it came back to that moment. That could be the last time that they ever speak. Like, think about that for a second, right? I mean, I could never think of that like with my sibling. Like, I'm going to speak to him forever, like forever until we can't speak anymore. But this may be the last time they ever interact. And she just had to get the chicken, the green chili chicken enchilada in there, like it was going to undermine his credibility. It's like, listen, Lori, I'm not here to talk about your green enchilada chicken. My niece is dead. My nephew is dead. My brother-in-law is dead. Our brother Alex is dead. Like all these bodies have piled up. Let's not talk about the green chili chicken enchilada. But yeah, that was the takeaway. That was the takeaway,
That's
right?
what people
Like
remember.
everyone's going to remember that. And when we all remember that, the jury's going to remember that, right? So what does the jury do with the green chili chicken enchilada? I don't know. I think the direct was very effective and painted a nice picture of what was going on with Lori and how she was off the ranch.
Kay Woodcock testified. Everybody thought she would, really go toe to toe with Lori. Everyone was kind of anticipating that back and forth. But again, we saw a different Lori with Kay than we saw with Nancy Joe and her brother. It was a more timid Kay. It was a more timid Lori. And as you mentioned, that final question, did you see or hear me conspire with Alex Cox to commit murder? And Kay responded, no, but I saw a lot of evidence that did.
Yeah.
Uh, what was your takeaway from that moment?
Well, I think I don't know if she's intimidated by Kay, if like she knows that Kay knows like everything,
Right.
and she knows that she murdered Kay's grandson, and I think some of that eked through. But again, I'm as I'm trying to analyze, and I'm having a hard time. I don't know if you are too, trying to analyze this trial because there is such history here, and not all the history is going to make it into the courtroom, right?
Right.
It's not all going to be there, and it's tough for me to have fresh eyes on this. So we have one producer at Court TV who joined our team relatively late, but he knows the story too because you know him as well. I'm
You talking
using him
about
for the
Tommy?
yeah, Tommy.
Yeah.
So I'm using him really for the Karen Reed case, trying to get fresh eyes on it, like seeing stuff for the first time. What does he think about it? Because once you've been through a full trial and then it's another one, and this one, it's like number three. It's hard. It's hard to understand where the jury is because ultimately those are the only people who matter when it comes to determining a verdict and getting justice for the victim and whatever justice is in the case, which to me is the truth. But how are they seeing all this for the very first time? And that's difficult here, really difficult.
And not knowing about JJ and Tylee being dead, at least yet. I'm sure that will come in, maybe. If she testifies, the judge has said that he might need to tell them that she is a convicted felon.
Right.
And they know very little about Chad, other than they don't know Chad's wife is dead. Yeah, there's a lot that you and I know that so many of us do that they don't have a clue. And
They
that'll
know about they know about Alex though. Lori told them about
do.
Alex, how he
Right.
died. Like, hey, I didn't murder him. He just
Right.
died.
He died 5 months to the day, she mentioned about Charles. How do you think the judge is doing keeping Lori in control? He seems to be fair with her, but also, he's got to walk this line.
Yeah. Well, and prosecutors do also. When you have someone who's pro se, you don't want to steamroll them as a prosecutor, and as a judge, you almost have to take an extra step to make sure that things aren't happening that are overrunning her rights because she doesn't have a lawyer. Like we all get it. Like she chose not to have a lawyer, but still, that if the case is appealed, everything's looked at a certain way. So you want to make sure that her rights are still upheld. And I think the judge has done a great job. He's not he's a judge who doesn't take over a trial. Like we've had there are judges like that who like, okay, this is my courtroom, no, he's like, let's let everything happen, but I'll make the calls as I need to make them. The big disadvantage that Lori really has in a lot of these objections that are taking place and legal things that are popping up is that she doesn't have access to the arguments to make. So prosecutors are winning a lot of these, and some of them that they're winning, could be in the toss up column if there's a lawyer making an argument, but she's not able to make those arguments, and I think that's where she has a disadvantage. Where she has the advantage was the way she took advantage of things in the opening statement. To try to create a filter for this case that, hey, jury, as you're looking at this, I'm a mother and this is a family tragedy, and Charles is really bad. Charles is bad. Charles did not like my daughter and he would go after her. Oh my goodness, great. And I thought she did that well. But then when you get to the nitty-gritty, witnesses testifying, legal rulings, etc., that's where there's a huge drop off.
You think she takes the stand?
Well, she's she's been able to sort of testify, but I think she will. I
And
think
does
she.
it help her?
Um, I think she told it. Well, here's the problem, right? Like she told the story to the jury in her opening statement.
Right.
Opening statement is not evidence. Now, if she doesn't testify to back up her version of what happened there, there could be an argument that she couldn't argue some of the things that she talked about in her opening statement. Like there has to be evidence of what you say happened for you to argue that that's what happened. Obviously, there can be reasonable inferences from some of the evidence, and if you can get other things in, you might have a workaround. But everything she said in her opening statement is basically a preview of her testimony because there were five people there that day and four of them are dead, right? And the only place it's coming from is going to come from her. So unless she's able to get in, get it in sort of through the back door, I don't think the defense will be that sophisticated. I think the defense is predicated upon her testifying and telling them, the jury, what happened. And she's the only living witness to what happened. So there's not going to be someone to, contradict what she says. So unless she's contradicted by her own prior inconsistent statement somewhere, but I think it's set up for her to testify, and I think she wants to, and I think that'll be a pivotal part of the case because that's where a lot of her version of what happened that day and perhaps her version of what was going on in her life, she'll have an opportunity to address.
But that also does then allow the prosecution to actually have her under oath to answer questions that she hasn't really answered for 5+ years.
I know. Well, sometimes when I say I think they're going to testify, it's like me also saying I want them to testify because I
I'm with
want
you. I'm with you.
I want these moments. And for me, every time I cover a trial, what people say, well, what do you think of this? What do you want to happen? What I want is for the truth to come out. And I always think anytime a criminal defendant testifies, we get closer to the truth. I think it's better for the jury. Now, obviously, we know all about the constitutional rights and protections that every defendant has and the burden that's on the prosecution. But I try to evaluate cases through the jury, the jurors who we bring in. These are just regular folks who get that notice in the mail and they come down and they're performing their civic duty. But that job is ultimately to figure out and tell us what happened. So the more information that they have, I think it's better. And when a defendant testifies, I think it gives the jury a better opportunity to get to the truth.
Vinny, always great talking to you. You have such good insight, especially because you have been following this from the beginning, from the day that Lori and Chad were in Hawaii, and here we are.
Well, let me tell you how we found this story because I don't know if I ever told you. So Court TV has a bunch of affiliate uh, stations around the country that are owned by the same parent company as us. So when we first launched, what we would do every day is we have like 44 stations. So there were like three of us working on the show, me and two producers. And we each took 15 stations and we would look at what they were reporting every day. And there was a report on this story, but it was the weirdest story. It was a story about the woman who was the model for Chad's book covers.
Really?
It, it was like, and I'm not sure if it was the Arizona affiliate or if it was our Salt
Boise.
Lake,
Or
our
Boise could have been KIVI in Boise, maybe.
right, right. It could have been Boise, it could have been Arizona, or it could have been out in Idaho. And then we started finding other stories from different affiliates on this. We're like, what's going on here? And then it took us like a good month, and then you being so kind and coming on my air on one of our shows, and like we locked you down for like, I don't know, like 45 minutes. And after that interview with you, all the pieces, as much as they could, sort of came together for us, and we kind of understood this unreal story for the first time. But the first time we came across the story it was a story about this woman who was the model for Chad's book covers, and we watched the story, and we watched it like 3 times, a local package, and we're like, there's something going on here. There
Right.
is so much more to this. We don't get it from this particular package because it was very narrow. But I said, we need to find out as much as we can about this story. And then finally we did. And a story, this is the kind of story that like whenever, if you retire and you're ever telling war stories, this is the one that we will talk about for the rest of our lives. It's unreal.
But you can't, I've learned you cannot tell it in 20 seconds in an elevator with someone. If they're like, why are you in Arizona? I'm like, well, sit down.
You got a couple hours. I'll try to explain it to you, but
Right.
it's amazing. And by the way, great work that you've done from the beginning here, Nate. And it's so appreciated by all of us who aren't like in it every day like you were. So we were able to understand it so much better, and that's because of the job that you did. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And we also need to give your team credit because you guys are the ones giving us all the video feed. It's a very underappreciated task by many in the media to show up. You cover the costs of that. You plug in, you let all of us take it. So all of you watching at home, thank Court TV for doing that with this trial and so many others that are always happening around the country.
Yeah, that it's our pleasure. We love doing it. We love being in there. And when we don't have control of the courtroom, I'm like, I get a little edgy. Like,
Right.
well, whose cameras are in there? I'm like, oh no, not them. No, not them. So, but
Vinny,
it's good. Yep.
thank you. Yeah, anything you want to add?
No, just great to see you. And how's your daughter doing?
She's doing great. Still doing her
Oh,
interviews. And in fact, I think you've interviewed CC Moore, the DNA genetic genealogy lady. She solved a bunch of crime. Anyway, she's going to interview her real soon.
oh, Cece is amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing. She's like a regular on us because we have like 3 cases that we're using this genetic genealogy on. So every time we talk about it, we need her in, and she's really she's one of the leaders in the whole field. So it's great to have her on.
And you'll be at CrimeCon, I'm assuming. I know it's a few months away, but
Yes, so I'll be at CrimeCon with Court TV, obviously, but also I'm bringing out my buddies. We do the Tangent podcast on Fridays on my YouTube channel, and these are 2 guys we did Court TV radio together. When Court TV radio was on Sirius XM, we would do the morning show. I was the host, Jonesy was sort of my sidekick, and Al was our regular guest that we would have on all the time. And we all grew up in Jersey. We're all almost the same age, and we all like grew up with the same life, but in different places. And we text all the time, and it's like our opportunity to get together once a week and talk true crime. But they're coming out to CrimeCon, and we rented a house, which is like 5 minutes from the venue. So you got to come over one day. We got a hot tub up on the
oh,
top.
nice.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
That's great. All right. For those of you watching, go catch Vinny and his friends at CrimeCon and with Core TV. Sweet. Thank you, sir. Always a
All
pleasure.
right.